Around here, lawyers earn their place, and from what I've seen of you so far, you're not even close." Manager Trevor waited for a reaction. The new attorney, Amara, gave him none. "What? You think standing there silent makes you look smart? You know what? Maybe this will finally teach you how things actually work in a real law firm." Without hesitation, he grabbed the heavy crystal tumbler off the corner of his desk and hurled it across the room. The glass shattered against the wall inches from her shoulder, exploding into a spray of jagged shards that rained down across the polished floor at her feet. Amara didn't flinch. She looked at the broken glass scattered around her shoes, then directly at Trevor. "I'm going to need your employee ID number, Mr. Hines." Manager Trevor had no idea that the ID number Amara was about to request would be the first item on her desk as the firm's newly appointed managing partner. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The black coffee in Amara's travel mug had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She didn't drink it, she just held it. Both hands wrapped around the cup and stared at the building across the street. Whitlock, Bryce, and Carrington, attorneys at law, 62 stories of glass and chrome cutting a sharp line into the gray morning sky. Her firm now. The brass nameplate by the front entrance still read 3 names. By next quarter, it would read 4. Hers would be the last one. She watched the revolving doors spin as associates and senior counsel filed inside in their tailored suits and polished shoes, balancing briefcases and oversized cups from the coffee shop on the corner. They laughed at private jokes, checked their phones, adjusted their cufflinks. Amara watched them and said nothing. She had been sitting in this car for 14 minutes, not because she was nervous. She needed to see them before they saw her. She needed to understand what she was walking into before she walked into it. Her phone buzzed. She already knew who it was. Still in the car, senior partner Owen Bryce. 68 years old, 40 years at the firm, and he still checked in like a worried uncle. She typed back, "Getting ready." His response came fast. "Amara, you can still walk in there with your title on the door already announced. Just say the word." She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Plain charcoal suit. No firm pin on her lapel. The temporary visitor badge in her bag read A. Whitlock, Junior Associate Contract Review. Technically inaccurate, strategically perfect. She typed, "I need to see who they really are, not who they perform to be in a partner's meeting." 3 dots appeared then, "Be careful." She put the phone in her pocket, picked up her bag, and got out of the car. The lobby smelled like fresh espresso and expensive carpet cleaner. A security guard barely glanced up when she walked in. She signed the visitor log habit and moved down the main corridor toward the contract's floor. She had memorized the building layout 3 nights ago. She knew exactly where she was going. The contract's manager's office sat on the 12th floor at the end of the east hallway, the corner office with the floor-to-ceiling view. She could hear voices before she reached it. Loud, loose, the scrape of leather shoes on polished concrete, and the rattle of crystal as someone poured a morning drink that wasn't coffee. She knocked once on the open door and stepped inside. The room held 5 people. 3 associates standing near the bar cart, loud and loose, still riding whatever joke had just landed. A 4th man, broad-shouldered, expensive watch, the kind of polished good-looking that knew it, leaning against the edge of a massive walnut desk with a crystal tumbler in his hand, holding court. And in the corner, nearly invisible against the bookshelf, a young paralegal with a stack of files pressed against her chest, staring at the carpet like she was trying to disappear into it. Amara stepped into the office. She extended the manila folder of case assignments she had been told to deliver. The loud man at the desk stopped talking. She felt his eyes before she heard his voice. "Hold on." The voice was smooth, almost friendly. "Almost. You lost, sweetheart." She didn't look up. She set the folder on the corner of his desk. "I'm talking to you." His voice had an edge now, still wearing its smile, but the smile had teeth. "Temps check in at the front desk, not in my office." She turned and looked at him for the first time. He was young, her age, maybe a year or 2 older. Tailored shirt rolled at the sleeves, gold cufflinks set on the desk beside a half-finished pour of bourbon. The nameplate at the edge of the walnut said TREVORHINES, Contracts Manager, East Division. His eyes moved over her slowly, top to bottom, the way men look at things they have already decided do not belong. "I found the office just fine," she said. "Thank you." One of the associates by the bar cart laughed. Trevor's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Oh, she talks," he said, more laughter. "Louder now. Listen." He pushed off the edge of the desk and took a step toward her. Slow, easy, like he had all the time in the world. "I don't know what firm you transferred from, sweetheart, but we have a way of doing things here. And part of that is," he paused and looked at the others, performing for them now, "knowing your place." The room went a little quieter. Amara looked at him. She said nothing. She let her eyes move once across the office, taking in the three associates, the silent paralegal, the bottle on the bar cart at 9 in the morning. Then she looked back at Trevor and held his gaze. That silence, that total unbothered silence, did something to Trevor's face. A muscle in his jaw ticked. His chin came up. He glanced over his shoulder at the others. A slow grin spread across his face, wide and deliberate, the kind that meant he had already decided what came next and wanted an audience for it. "You know what?" he said, turning back to her. "I should explain something to you, since you're new." He clasped his hands together like a teacher about to begin a lesson. Every new attorney who walks through that door, they go through a little tradition. It's how we do things here at Whitlock and Bryce. He tilted his head, savoring the word ritual. Behind him, one of the associates, blonde, mid-30s, name embroidered above his shirt pocket that read STEINER, let out a short laugh. The others shifted, leaning in. "A welcome ritual," Trevor continued. His voice was warm, almost kind. That was the worst part, how kind it sounded. "Every single new hire goes through it. No exceptions." He spread his hands wide like he was being perfectly reasonable. "It's not personal, it's just tradition." Amara looked at him. "Is that right?" It wasn't a question. "That's right." His grin got wider. He picked up the heavy crystal tumbler sitting on his desk. He held it loosely, casually, swinging it slightly at his side. The bourbon swirled inside. "We like to make sure our new people understand how things work around here. Make sure they know their place from day one." He paused, his eyes locked onto hers. "Helps avoid confusion later on." The room was very quiet now, everyone waiting, everyone watching. Trevor looked back at his audience one more time, and whatever he saw there, those eager, grinning faces, seemed to settle something in him. He looked back at Amara. "Welcome to Whitlock and Bryce," he said, and he raised the tumbler and threw it. The crystal sailed past her left shoulder and detonated against the wall behind her. The sound was enormous, sharp, an explosion of glass and bourbon that sprayed across the books on the shelf and rained down onto the carpet at her heels. A jagged shard skittered across the floor and stopped against the toe of her shoe. The bourbon ran in slow, dark streaks down the pale wallpaper. The room erupted, howling, hollering. Steiner doubled over, slapping the desk. Two of the associates grabbed each other's arms, barely staying upright. The laughter hit the walls and bounced back, filling every corner of the office. Trevor stood in front of her, empty hands still extended, grinning from ear to ear, waiting, expecting to see her face crumble, expecting tears or rage or the frantic scramble of someone who didn't know how to handle themselves. He got none of it. Amara stood exactly where she was, both feet planted, shoulders straight. A single shard of glass glinted against the leather of her shoe. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She didn't move a single muscle in her face. She just looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, with something Trevor clearly had no category for. A total iron calm that made his grin flicker for just a half second before he caught it and held it in place. The laughter around him started to thin at the edges. A few of the associates who had been howling began to quiet, watching her with something that wasn't quite amusement anymore. Amara reached down slowly and brushed a fragment of glass off the cuff of her trousers, perfectly level, no trembling, no rush. Then she turned her head and looked at Trevor the way a person looks at something they are filing away permanently. "I'm going to need your employee ID number," she said. The laughter surged back louder than before, fed by relief. Trevor rattled off the digits in her face. Steiner sang the number back in a mocking voice, dragging out each digit. The others echoed it like it was the punchline to the greatest joke they had ever heard. She memorized it. She memorized every number, every face, every laugh. The young paralegal in the corner had not made a sound. She was staring at the files in her arms so hard it looked like she was trying to read something written between the pages. Amara memorized her, too. Then she turned and walked out of the office, back straight, steps even, glass crunching softly under her shoes. Not one moment of hesitation. The laughter followed her all the way down the corridor. She let it. The restroom at the end of the 12th floor was small and rarely used, tucked behind a service stairwell that most of the associates never bothered with. Amara locked the door behind her. The laughter from Trevor's office was still audible, muffled now, but there. She could hear it bleeding through the walls, rising and falling in waves. Someone kept setting it off again every time it started to die down, probably Steiner. He had that kind of energy, the kind that needed to keep poking at something long after the moment had passed. She stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her was composed, but the evidence was on her. A faint amber droplet of bourbon had landed on the lapel of her charcoal jacket. A second, smaller spot darkened the collar of her white blouse. Her right shoe had a thin streak of liquor running down the side where the spray from the wall had caught her. She turned slowly and checked her back in the mirror. A small triangular shard of crystal was still clinging to the wool of her jacket, lodged just below the shoulder blade. She reached back and picked it off carefully, holding it between her thumb and forefinger. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she set it down on the edge of the sink and ran the cold tap. She cupped water in both hands and pressed it against the back of her neck. Then she straightened up and looked at herself again. She had been here before. Not in this restroom, not in this building, but in this moment, this exact moment. She had been here more times than she could count. 12 years in the law. 12 years of conference rooms that fell quiet when she walked in, of brief assignments that mysteriously rerouted to her white male colleagues, of credit that went somewhere else, of being watched for any crack, any flinch, any sign that she didn't belong. She had never given them one. She wasn't going to start today. She blotted the bourbon spot on her lapel with a damp paper towel, working from the outside in, slow and methodical. She brushed the dust of glass particles from her sleeve. She rinsed the streak off her shoe with a wet wad of tissue. It wasn't enough to fully erase what had happened, but it was enough. In fact, leaving the faint amber stain on her collar was better. It made the next thing she was about to do more honest. She thought about Bryce's voice that morning. Be careful. She thought about Trevor's face, that wide, performed grin right before he raised the tumbler. The way he had looked back at his audience first, making sure they were watching. The way he had called it a tradition, a ritual, said it like he was doing her a favor, said it like he had done it 100 times before, because he had. That was the part that settled in her chest like a stone, not the glass, not the laughter, the ease of it. The complete and total comfort of a man who had done this, some version of this, over and over again, and had never once faced a consequence for it until now. She dried her hands. She straightened her jacket. She slipped the shard of crystal into a small evidence envelope she pulled from the inside pocket of her bag. Old habit. She had carried evidence envelopes in her bag since her second year of practice. They had a way of becoming useful. She sealed it, wrote the date, the time, and the location across the front in small, neat handwriting and slid it back into her bag. She looked at herself one last time in the mirror. Bourbon-stained collar, faint glass dust still clinging to the fabric near her shoulder, expression entirely her own. And she made a decision that she felt in her whole body, the way you feel a door closing behind you. She unlocked the door and walked out. The main partner's boardroom was on the 40th floor. Amara took the elevator up alone and stepped out onto a hallway lined with oil paintings of former senior partners, all of them men, most of them white, all of them watching her pass with the painted indifference of people who had never once imagined someone like her walking these halls in any capacity other than service. She walked past them without looking. The boardroom doors were closed. She could see through the smoked glass that the senior partner's quarterly orientation meeting was already in progress. She had been scheduled to attend at 10 o'clock. 8:43 a.m. She was 17 minutes early. Good. She found a chair just outside the boardroom and sat down. She took out her phone, opened the document she had drafted 3 nights ago, and reviewed her notes one more time. Then she opened a fresh email and began to type. Subject line: Formal report incident, 12th floor contracts division, 8:14 a.m. She attached 2 photographs she had taken in the restroom, the bourbon stain on her collar, the shard of crystal lying on the white porcelain. She typed steadily, professionally, every sentence factual and dated. She paused with her finger over the send button. Then she set the email to draft and put the phone away. Not yet. Sending it now sent it through normal channels where it would be filtered, slow-walked, possibly never seen at all. She knew exactly how to make sure it would be read and by whom and when. She just needed the right moment. The boardroom door opened. A young assistant stepped out, looked at Amara, and smiled the polite professional smile of a person who had no idea who was sitting in front of them. "Ms. Whitlock, they're ready for you." Amara stood. She buttoned her jacket over the stain. She walked inside. The boardroom was large and quiet in the way that important rooms are quiet, even when they are full. A long mahogany table ran down the center, polished to such a high gloss that the recessed ceiling lights reflected back as soft yellow ovals along its surface. 14 senior partners sat around it, most of them in their 50s and 60s, all of them in suits that cost more than a junior associate's monthly salary. 2 open seats remained, one at the head of the table, one halfway down the right side. Amara took the seat halfway down. She set her bag at her feet, placed her folio on the table in front of her, and folded her hands. The room kept moving around her. A senior partner near the far end was finishing a slow comment about second quarter billables. 2 others were murmuring to each other over a printed memo. The conversation had the easy authority of men who had spent their careers in rooms exactly like this one, who had built those rooms, who could not conceive of a version of those rooms in which they were not the most important person sitting in them. Nobody looked at Amara directly. A few glanced. New face, unfamiliar suit, faint stain on the collar that one of them registered with a fractional lift of the eyebrow and immediately set aside as someone else's problem. That was fine. She hadn't come here to be noticed yet. Owen Bryce entered at 8:58. He came through the side door, briefcase in one hand, his reading glasses already pushed up on his forehead. He looked at the open chair at the head of the table, then at Amara, then back at the chair. He held her eyes for exactly 1/2 second, and she gave him the smallest nod. He nodded back almost imperceptibly and walked to the head of the table. He set his briefcase down. He did not sit yet. "Good morning, everyone." His voice carried the calm weight of a man who had been the senior name on this firm's door for 16 years. The murmuring at the table tapered off. "Before we begin the quarterly review, I have an announcement that I will be making in full at the all-firm meeting on Monday, but which I want this room to hear first." A few of the partners straightened. One set down his coffee cup. The smooth, professional tension of men who were about to be told something they had not anticipated settled across the room. "As most of you know," Bryce continued, "we initiated a confidential succession review 14 months ago, in coordination with the executive committee and an external governance firm. That review concluded 6 weeks ago. The committee's recommendation was unanimous." He paused. He looked around the table at every face one by one. "Effective Monday, our new managing partner of Whitlock, Bryce and Carrington will be Amara Whitlock." The room did not erupt. The room of senior partners did not do erupting, but every head turned. Every gaze, 14 of them, swung simultaneously toward the woman in the charcoal suit halfway down the right side of the table. The faint amber stain on her collar caught the light. Amara did not move. She kept her hands folded. She kept her expression neutral. She let them look. Bryce kept going, his voice unhurried. "Ms. Whitlock holds a JD from Columbia, an LLM in corporate governance from the London School of Economics, and 12 years of practice with a record that includes the successful defense of 3 Fortune 500 boards in matters of fiduciary breach, and the structuring of 2 of the largest cross-border mergers in this firm's history, which she advised on while at her previous firm." The succession committee determined, and I agree, that she is the most qualified candidate this firm has produced or recruited in 2 decades. He paused. She is also the youngest managing partner this firm has ever appointed, and she is the first black woman to hold this position at any AM Law 100 firm in the city's history. The silence in the room had changed character. It was no longer the silence of polite professional surprise. It was the silence of 14 men recalibrating in real time what the next several years of their professional lives were going to look like. Bryce sat down at the head of the table. He looked at Amara. "Amara, would you like to say a few words?" She unfolded her hands. She stood slowly, with the same calm she had carried out of Trevor Hind's office 20 minutes ago. She buttoned her jacket. The faint stain on her collar remained visible just above the lapel, and she did not try to hide it. "Thank you, Owen." Her voice was even, measured, the voice of a woman who had prepared for this moment for months and had no intention of rushing through it. "I will keep this brief. I joined this firm because I believe it has the foundation to become the most respected law practice in the country. Not the most profitable, although profitability will follow. The most respected. That distinction matters to me. I intend to spend my tenure making sure it matters to all of us." She paused. "I will be conducting an operational review of every division over the next 30 days. I will be meeting with each of you individually. Until then, please continue as you were. I will not be making announcements at the all-firm gathering on Monday beyond a brief introduction. The work begins quietly, the way good work usually does." She sat back down. Across the table, one of the senior partners, a man in his 60s named Reginald Carrington, the third name on the door, looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave her the smallest professional nod, the kind that carried no warmth but signaled acknowledgement. She would take it, for now. The meeting moved on to quarterly billings. Amara listened. She took notes. She said nothing else for the next 90 minutes. And the entire time, in the back of her mind, a clock had started running. 12 floors below, Trevor Hins was still laughing. He had no idea. The quarterly meeting ended at 10:47. The partners filed out in small clusters, a few of them lingering near Amara's chair as the room emptied, performing the careful diplomatic dance of men who had just learned that their professional landscape had shifted and were now calculating, with the speed of long practice, how to position themselves in the new terrain. Reginald Carrington was the first to approach her directly. He extended his hand. "Ms. Whitlock, a pleasure." She stood and shook it. "Mr. Carrington, I look forward to our individual meeting." His grip was firm, his eyes professionally pleasant. He held her hand a half-second longer than necessary. "I should mention, my calendar is fairly constrained over the next several weeks. My assistant will reach out to coordinate timing." He smiled. "I'm sure we'll find something that works." He walked away before she could respond. Amara watched him go. She filed the exchange away exactly as it was. Polite, gracious, and a clean professional notice that he intended to delay any sit-down with her for as long as procedurally defensible. She had expected resistance. She had not expected it within 90 seconds of the announcement, from the third name on the door, delivered with a smile. Good. She wanted to know who was who. Owen Bryce waited until the room had cleared. Then he closed the boardroom door, walked back to where Amara was gathering her folio, and stood across the table from her with the particular tightness in his shoulders that she had come to recognize over the last 14 months. "What happened on the 12th floor this morning?" She looked up. "How did you hear?" "I didn't hear specifics." "I heard you went down there, and I heard there's now a maintenance request in the system for emergency cleanup in Trevor Hind's office, filed by his own assistant at 8:31 a.m. describing, quote, accidental spillage." He paused. "I have known Trevor Hinds for 9 years. He is not a man who has accidents in his own office." He threw a crystal tumbler at the wall behind me. She said it the same way she would describe a billing entry. "Bourbon, approximately 3 ounces. He missed by about 6 inches, which I believe was intentional. He had an audience of 3 associates and 1 paralegal." She paused. "It is not, I have come to understand, the first time he has done something of this nature to someone new." Bryce closed his eyes for one full second. "Pull him today," he said. I will sign the suspension paperwork before lunch. Not yet. He opened his eyes. Amara. Not yet, Owen. She kept her voice low even and her eyes on his. If I suspend Trevor Hines today, every person in this firm who has watched him operate for 9 years, every associate who has laughed at the right joke, every partner who has looked the other way, every assistant who has filed the cleanup request and kept her mouth shut, all of them go underground. They close ranks. I spend the next year fighting a war I cannot see, against people I cannot name, in a building I do not yet know. She set her folio down on the table. I need to see the whole structure first, all of it, who protects him, who has been hurt by him, how deep it goes and who has been keeping records if anyone has. Then we move. Bryce looked at her for a long moment. She could see the conflict in his face, the senior partner who wanted to act on the principle, the friend who did not want to watch her get hurt on her way to the corner office she had earned, the lawyer who understood with reluctance that her strategic instinct was sound. How long? 72 hours to scope it, then I move, he exhaled. 72 hours, after that I act with you or without you. That's all I need. He nodded once. He picked up his briefcase. At the door he paused without turning around. Amara, his voice was quieter. I have wanted you in that chair for 2 years. I do not want to lose you in your first week because Trevor Hines is too stupid to know what he just did. You won't. He left. Amara sat back down at the empty boardroom table for a moment. She looked at the 14 empty chairs and the polished mahogany and the soft yellow light pooling on the surface. Then she pulled out her phone, opened the draft email from earlier and adjusted the recipient line. She removed the general HR address. She added a single name, Margaret Ackafer, Director of Risk and Compliance. Then she added Owen Bryce. She set the email to send at 11:30 a.m. exactly, which gave her 43 minutes to make one more stop before it landed. She gathered her folio and her bag. She took the elevator down to the 22nd floor, where the firm's Compliance and Internal Investigations Division had its offices. She had memorized the directory 3 nights ago. She knew exactly where she was going. She had been thinking about Margaret Ackafer since she had first reviewed the firm's executive roster during the succession process, and had noticed a particular pattern in the personnel files Margaret's office had processed over the past 6 years. Margaret was, by all available indications, the only senior administrator in the firm who had been quietly trying to do something about Trevor Hines. The cleanup requests, the resignation letters, the exit interview notes that referenced unspecified workplace climate concerns, all of them had passed through her department, and many of them carried Margaret's handwritten margin notes flagged for follow-up that had never come. She had been waiting, Amara suspected, for someone to come along who could actually do the following up. Amara stepped off the elevator on 22 and walked down the hall. Margaret Ackafer's office door was open. The woman behind the desk was in her mid-50s, gray streaks in her dark, twist-out, gold-rimmed reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She was reading a document in a manila folder. She looked up when Amara appeared in her doorway. She set the folder down very slowly. "Ms. Whitlock," she said. Her voice was professional. Her eyes were not. "Please come in. Close the door." Amara stepped inside and closed it behind her. Margaret Ackafer's office was smaller than Amara had expected for a director-level role. One window facing an interior light well, a desk that had seen at least 1 decade of steady use, 2 visitor chairs in front of it, and every available inch of the back wall covered, from floor to ceiling, in legal-grade filing cabinets, each one with a small label on the front in handwritten block letters. Amara took it all in with one sweep of her eyes and understood, in a single second, that she had come to the right place. "Sit down, Ms. Whitlock." Amara sat. Margaret studied her for a long moment from across the desk, not the polite studying of a director meeting a new managing partner. The careful, evaluating studying of a woman who had been waiting a long time for someone to walk through her door and was now deciding in real time whether the woman who had finally arrived was actually the one. "You went down to the 12th floor this morning." "I did. Trevor Hines." "Yes." Margaret leaned back in her chair. Her hands rested on the arms, the fingers steady. Tell me what happened, not the version you would put in a formal report, the version that happened. Amara told her. She told it the way Margaret had asked for it, in plain, unrehearsed language: the bourbon, the tumbler, the wall, the laughter, the paralegal in the corner. Margaret listened without interrupting. She did not take notes. She did not nod or react. She simply listened with the complete and uninterrupted attention of a woman who had heard variations of this story before, more times than she wanted to count, and intended to hear this version of it cleanly. When Amara finished, Margaret was quiet for several seconds. Then she stood up, walked to one of the filing cabinets behind her desk, the second from the left, third drawer down, and unlocked it with a key from her pocket. She pulled out a thick accordion folder, brought it back to the desk, and set it down between them. 18 years, she said. I have been the director of risk and compliance at this firm for 18 years. I have watched Trevor Hinz escalate from a second-year associate who threw a stapler at an intern in 2009 to a senior associate who locked a paralegal in a conference room as a, quote, prank in 2014, to a contracts manager who has, by my count, driven 7 people out of this firm in the last 6 years. She opened the accordion folder. Inside were 7 subfolders, each one labeled with a name. She turned them so Amara could read them. Aaliyah Brooks. Resigned 2019. Cited family reasons. Her exit interview included 3 separate references to, quote, hostile interactions with contracts division leadership that were redacted before the file went to HR. I have the unredacted version. Devin Cho. Resigned 2020, transferred to a competitor. Filed a confidential complaint 2 weeks before he left that was, according to the official record, withdrawn voluntarily. I have a copy of the original. He did not withdraw it voluntarily. Maria Reyes. Resigned 2021. She kept going. 7 names, 7 stories, each one with the same shape. Disproportionately women of color, disproportionately junior. Each departure preceded by a documented pattern of harassment, followed by a smoothing over, followed by silence. And each one of these, Amara said quietly, came across your desk. Each one of these came across my desk. Margaret's voice was even. And in each one of these, I did what I could within the boundaries of my authority. I flagged. I memorialized. I followed up. I escalated to the executive committee in 3 cases. In each case, the response I received was that the matter had been handled through alternative channels. Trevor Hinz, you should understand, has a sponsor on this floor of the building. A senior partner who has been protecting him since he was a first-year associate. Amara already knew. She had suspected from the moment Reginald Carrington had smiled at her in the boardroom and told her his calendar was constrained. Carrington, Margaret nodded once. Trevor Hinz is his sister's son. Amara absorbed it without expression. Does it appear in any of these files? Nowhere. The family relationship has never been formally disclosed. It is technically not a violation because Mr. Carrington has never personally signed off on Trevor's reviews, his hires, his promotions, or his disciplinary actions. He has simply made sure over 15 years that the partners who do sign off on those things have understood the political weather. Amara looked at the 7 folders on the desk. Then she looked up at Margaret. Why are you giving me these now? Margaret's expression did not change, but something in her eyes did. Because the succession committee was a real committee, Ms. Whitlock. I was on it. I read every file. I voted. And when the vote came in unanimous, I knew that for the first time in 18 years, the person walking into the managing partner's office was someone who would actually open the folder if I put it on her desk. She slid the accordion across. Opened the folder. Amara took it. The weight of it was substantial. She thought about the paralegal in the corner of Trevor's office, the one with the files pressed against her chest. She thought about the bourbon stain on her own collar. She thought about 7 names and the dozens more, almost certainly, who had not become folders because they had left too quietly to even be noticed. I am going to need everything you have, she said. Not just these 7, everything, every margin note, every escalation memo. Every redacted exit interview, every cleanup request from his office over the last 9 years. It is already pulled. I started pulling it the day the committee voted. Margaret almost smiled, almost. I will have the complete archive on your desk by end of day, accessible only to you and to me until you indicate otherwise." "Good." Amara stood. She held the accordion under her arm. At the door she paused. "Margaret." "Yes. Thank you." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "Don't thank me, Ms. Whitlock. Do something." Amara left. In the hallway she pulled out her phone. She opened the draft email she had set to send at 11:30. She read it through one more time. Then she changed the send time. Now, the email left her phone at 11:09. 3 floors above, Trevor Hines had 18 minutes left of believing he had gotten away with it. The email reached Margaret Acaffer at 11:09 a.m. It reached Owen Bryce at the same minute. The system timestamped both deliveries. Amara was already in the elevator, descending from the 22nd floor back to the 12th. The accordion folder zipped inside her bag, her face composed, her breathing steady. She had decided, in the 11 minutes she had spent walking to the elevator from Margaret's office, that she was not going to wait the 72 hours after all. Not because she had abandoned the strategic instinct that had prompted her to ask for them, because Margaret had handed her, in a single conversation, more documented structural evidence than she had expected to gather in a week. The map was already drawn. She did not need to walk the territory. She needed to walk into Trevor Hines' office. The elevator opened on the 12th floor. The corridor outside the contracts division was quieter than it had been at 8:14 that morning. The associates had dispersed to their cubicles. The paralegal who had been standing in Trevor's office had returned to her workstation in the bullpen and was staring at her monitor with the careful immobility of a person trying very hard to look busy. Amara walked past her without stopping, but she noted the woman's nameplate. Lydia Ferreira, paralegal, 2nd year. Lydia Ferreira looked up just once. Her eyes met Amara's. Amara saw, in that 1/2 second of contact, exactly what she had needed to see. Lydia Ferreira had watched a man throw a glass at a woman in his office at 8:14 a.m., and she had not said a word. And she had been thinking ever since about the fact that she had not said a word. And the look she gave Amara now was the look of a person who would say a word, the next time, if the next time ever came, if the building gave her any reason at all to believe that her word would land somewhere safe. Amara filed it away. She kept walking. Trevor's office door was closed. Through the smoked glass panel beside it, she could see him at his desk, on the phone, leaning back in his leather chair with one foot propped against the edge of the walnut. The wall behind him still bore the dark streak of bourbon. The maintenance crew had not yet arrived. He was laughing at something the person on the other end of the line had said. She knocked once and opened the door without waiting for him to respond. He looked up. His face went through 3 distinct expressions in under 2 seconds. The initial irritation of a man being interrupted. The flash of recognition. And then, as the door clicked shut behind her and she stepped fully into the office, the slower and much more uncertain settling of a man who was beginning to register that the woman standing in front of him was not behaving the way a junior temp who had just been humiliated should be behaving. He covered the phone with one hand. "I'll have to call you back." He hung up without waiting for a response. He looked at her for a moment. Then he gave her a slow, deliberate smile. "Couldn't stay away." Amara walked to the chair across from his desk and sat down. She set her bag on the floor beside her. She crossed her hands in her lap. She did not return the smile. "Mr. Hines, I want to give you the courtesy of hearing this from me directly before it reaches you through other channels." Something in his face shifted. Smile stayed, but the muscles around his eyes did not. "Hearing what?" "At 11:09 this morning, I submitted a formal incident report to the firm's Director of Risk and Compliance and to the Senior Partner of Record, documenting what occurred in this office at 8:14. The report includes 2 photographs, a physical evidence sample collected from my jacket, the names of the 4 witnesses present, and a request for a full review of your conduct over your tenure at this firm." He stared at her. "In addition, at 9:00 a.m. I was formally introduced to the senior partners as the firm's incoming managing partner effective Monday. The announcement will be made to the full firm at the all-hands meeting next week. Mr. Bryce confirmed the appointment in the boardroom this morning. Mr. Carrington was present. She watched his face. The shift happened in stages. First, the smile broke, not all at once. The corners of his mouth held their position for about half a second after the rest of his face had already given up, and then they collapsed too. Second, his eyes moved to the door, an involuntary glance, as if he were checking whether anyone else was about to walk in and confirm what he had just heard. Third, his hands. The right one moved off the desk and into his lap where she could not see it. The left one stayed where it was, but the fingers tightened against the wood. He did not speak. Amara continued, "I am not here to confront you, Mr. Hinz. That is not the purpose of this visit. I am also not here to tell you what is going to happen next. The review will determine what happens next, and I will allow that process to proceed through the proper channels without my personal involvement, because I do not intend to give your eventual counsel any procedural grounds on which to contest the outcome." She paused. "I am here for one reason. I want you to understand, while you are sitting in this chair in this office with that wall behind you, that I know exactly who you are. I know what you did this morning. I know what you have done to 7 other people who came through this firm in the last 6 years. I know who has been protecting you. I know how the cleanup requests get filed. I know how the exit interviews get redacted. I know all of it." She let the silence sit. "I wanted you to know that I know. Before the rest of the building does." She stood up. She picked up her bag. "You will hear from compliance by end of day." She walked to the door. She did not look back. She opened it, stepped out into the corridor, and closed it softly behind her. In the bullpen, Lydia Ferreira was still at her workstation. As Amara passed, she looked up. This time she did not look away. Amara gave her the smallest nod. Lydia nodded back. The first countermove arrived at 2:47 p.m. that same afternoon. Amara was in a temporary office on the 38th floor, 2 floors below the managing partner's suite, which she would formally occupy the following Monday. She had asked for the interim space deliberately. She had wanted 3 days of operating from a smaller room with a closable door before the building started routing its expectations through the corner office. Her phone buzzed. Internal extension. "Margaret Acaffer, Ms. Whitlock. Reginald Carrington has just walked into my office unannounced and is sitting across from my desk. He is requesting a copy of the incident report submitted this morning. He is also requesting access to the file archive on the contracts division. He is being, in his words, very calm and very patient about the request. I have told him that all materials submitted under formal compliance procedure are confidential to the recipients and the subject of the inquiry until the review is complete, and that I am not authorized to release them to a partner of the firm, even a senior partner, without your explicit instruction." Amara closed her laptop. What is his response? He has informed me that he intends to escalate to the executive committee if his request is not granted within the hour. Amara felt a small, steady satisfaction settle in her chest. Carrington was moving faster than she had expected. That was useful. Men who moved fast on the defensive made mistakes that men who moved slowly did not. "Margaret, please tell Mr. Carrington that I will be down in 7 minutes. Ask him to wait." "Understood." She hung up. She stood, buttoned her jacket, and took the stairs down to 22. She wanted the 7 minutes. Carrington needed to sit in Margaret's small office, in one of the 2 visitor chairs with the wall of filing cabinets behind him, for 7 minutes before she arrived. The geography of the meeting was going to do half of her work for her. When she walked in, Carrington was on his phone. He ended the call quickly and stood. He was taller than she had registered in the boardroom, 6'3" or 4", with the easy confidence of a man who had spent 40 years being the most important person in every room he had ever entered. He extended his hand. She shook it. The grip was firm. The eyes were not pleasant any longer. "Ms. Whitlock, thank you for coming down. I appreciate your time." "Mr. Carrington, please sit." He sat. Margaret remained behind her desk, her hands folded on top of a closed manila folder, her expression entirely professional. Carrington began the way men like Carrington always began. He spoke about the firm. He spoke about institutional memory. He spoke about the importance of process and discretion and the careful management of internal matters. He spoke for almost 4 minutes before he came anywhere near the actual reason he was sitting in the chair, and when he did, he came at it sideways, the way a senior litigator approaches a witness he intends to break gently. "I understand," he said finally, "that an incident report was filed this morning concerning my colleague Trevor Hins. I would like to review the report and the supporting materials, not to interfere with the process. Simply to ensure, given Trevor's 9-year history at this firm, that whatever procedural steps follow are taken with full context and appropriate care." Amara let the sentence finish completely. She let it hang in the air for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she said, "Mr. Carrington, Trevor Hins is your nephew, your sister's son." The silence that followed was different from any silence the room had held so far. Carrington's face did not change immediately. He was too disciplined for that. But something behind it moved, a quick internal recalibration, the calculation of a man trying to decide in real time how much of what she had just said was a guess and how much was documented. "Ms. Whitlock, I'm not sure where you are getting your information. You disclosed the relationship to no one when Trevor was hired in 2015. You have not disclosed it in any of his subsequent reviews or promotions. You have not personally signed off on any of his disciplinary matters, which has allowed you to operate within the technical letter of the firm's conflict of interest policy while functioning as his sponsor for 15 years. I have his employment file. I have your family records, which are a matter of public record. I have the timeline of every internal incident involving Trevor Hins that has been quietly resolved through alternative channels, and I have a credible accounting of which channels those were, who escalated to them, and who closed the escalation." She paused. "I am not asking you a question, Mr. Carrington. I am informing you that you will not be receiving the incident report. You will not be receiving access to the Contracts Division archive. You will not be making calls to the Executive Committee about this matter. The review will proceed through compliance and through outside counsel, and your participation in any discussion concerning Trevor Hins, from this moment forward, constitutes interference with an active internal investigation and a breach of the conflict of interest disclosure requirement that has gone unaddressed for 15 years. Carrington stared at her. The pleasant professional mask was completely gone. What was left underneath was something colder and much more careful, the expression of a man who had just understood that he was no longer the most important person in the room he was sitting in, and might not be the most important person in the room he sat in tomorrow either. "You are making a significant assumption about the support you have, Ms. Whitlock." "I am not making any assumptions, Mr. Carrington. I am quoting the firm's own bylaws. Article 7, Section 4. The disclosure obligations attach to the partner, not to the matter. You have been in continuing violation since June of 2015. She let it sit. "I would like you to leave Ms. Ockhaffer's office now. You will hear from outside counsel by the end of the week regarding the formal disclosure review of your own conduct. In the interim, I would strongly advise you not to discuss this matter with Trevor Hins, with any member of the Executive Committee, or with any other partner of the firm. Doing so will be documented as additional interference. We are clear." Carrington stood slowly. He did not extend his hand. "You are new here, Ms. Whitlock." "I am, Mr. Carrington. I was hired specifically to be new." He looked at her for one more long moment. Then he turned and walked out of Margaret's office without looking back. When the door closed behind him, Margaret exhaled once very quietly. "That," she said, "was a long time coming." Amara looked at the door for a moment. Then she turned back to Margaret. "It is going to get worse before it gets better. He will not move directly now. He will move through other people. We need to be ready." "We are ready, Ms. Whitlock." Margaret tapped the manila folder on her desk. "I have been ready for 18 years. The story broke on Friday morning at 6:32 a.m. not on the front page of a major paper, the Legal Trade Press. An online publication called the Bar Ledger, which covered law firm leadership transitions, partner moves, and internal governance disputes, and was read by exactly the audience Reginald Carrington needed to reach. The headline read, "New managing partner at Whitlock Bryce faces internal backlash amid allegations of overreach in first week." Amara read it in her car at 6:48 a.m., parked outside the firm's underground garage entrance, the way she had read every difficult document of her career, in private, slowly, all the way through, before she allowed herself to react to any single sentence in it. The piece was careful. It did not name a source. It did not directly name Trevor Hines. It did not describe what had occurred in his office on Tuesday morning. It did, however, describe the new managing partner as, quote, moving aggressively to assert authority in her first week through informal disciplinary actions that have bypassed standard partner review, end quote. It cited, quote, multiple senior partners who requested anonymity, end quote, expressing concern about, quote, governance norms and the proper separation between executive authority and internal investigations, end quote. It mentioned in the third paragraph that the new managing partner was the youngest and the first black woman to hold the position at the firm, and noted that her appointment had been the product of, quote, a confidential succession process whose criteria have not been made fully transparent to the partnership, end quote. Amara read the piece twice. The second time, she read it the way a litigator reads a deposition transcript, marking each insinuation, each carefully placed adjective, each strategic omission. The piece did not contain a single factually false statement. It did not need to. It was a piece designed to do exactly one thing: plant the suggestion in the minds of every senior attorney who would read it before lunch that the firm's new managing partner had been appointed for reasons other than merit and was now exceeding the boundaries of her authority. It was, she thought with something almost like professional admiration, very well constructed. Carrington had not written it. He was too smart to leave fingerprints. But he had made the call, or someone had made the call on his behalf, to the right reporter at the right outlet, on the right morning of the week to land in the right inboxes before the weekend. She picked up her phone. She did not call Bryce. She did not call Margaret. She called a number she had not dialed in 18 months, the personal cell of a woman named Yolanda Chen, who had been her closest friend and ally in the New York bar for the better part of a decade, who now ran the legal communications practice at one of the most respected reputation management firms in the country, and who had been, 3 years ago, the first person Amara had told when the succession committee at Whitlock Bryce had quietly approached her. Yolanda picked up on the second ring. I saw it. I have already pulled the byline. I have already started the inquiry on who placed it. Give me until noon. Yolanda, I know. I am already on it. What do you want the response to look like? Amara watched the parking garage entrance for a moment. A black town car was pulling in, the kind that carried senior partners to their reserved spaces. She could not see who was in the back seat. I do not want a defensive statement. I do not want the firm issuing a clarification. I want a full disclosure. Today, the succession criteria, the committee composition, the vote. I want the full Trevor Hines file referred to outside counsel by end of business, and I want that referral announced internally by Bryce at the all-firm meeting on Monday. I want the conflict of interest review of Reginald Carrington opened formally before the close of business today, and I want the existence of that review acknowledged in the firm's response to the bar ledger by 4 p.m. Yolanda was quiet for one beat. Then she said, "You are not playing defense." "No, I am not. He thinks the article puts me on defense. The article puts him on defense if we respond by opening the books. He cannot survive the books being open. He has been counting on the books staying closed for 15 years. Understood. I will call Owen Bryce directly. I will need his sign-off on the disclosure package. He will sign. I spoke to him last night about the contingency. He is expecting your call. You drafted the disclosure package already. I drafted it on Wednesday." Yolanda laughed once, short and dry. "Of course you did. I will call you back at 11. Amara hung up. She sat in her car for another moment. Then she pulled into the garage and parked in the managing partner's space for the first time. The space was at the far end of the executive level, beside a small brass plate that someone had not yet had time to update. The plate still read RCARRNGTON. Carrington had been using the space for years. There was no formal record indicating it had ever been assigned to him. She took a photograph of the plate with her phone, date and time stamped. Then she went upstairs. By noon, Yolanda had identified the reporter's source, a junior partner in the litigation division named Whitman who owed Carrington a favor from a 2019 client transition, and who had been, according to two independent sources Yolanda's firm had reached overnight, in Carrington's office for approximately 40 minutes on Thursday afternoon. By 1:15, Bryce had signed the full disclosure package and authorized its release. By 2:30, the firm's general counsel had issued the formal referral of the Trevor Hines matter to outside counsel, a step that converted an internal review into a documented external investigation that could not be quietly closed by any internal actor. By 3:50, the firm's official response to the bar ledger had been filed with the publication's editorial desk, 10 minutes ahead of Yolanda's self-imposed deadline. The response was 4 pages long. It contained, in clean and professional language, every single fact that Carrington had spent 15 years making sure no one in the building would ever see in writing. By 4:30, the publication had updated its article with the firm's full statement appended at the bottom, untouched, in full. By 5:00, 3 separate senior attorneys at peer firms had emailed Amara personally to express their support, the first congratulating her on the appointment, the second commending the transparency of the disclosure, the third nodding, with carefully professional understatement, that he had always wondered what was going on at Whitlock Bryce. At 5:47, Margaret Acaffer knocked on the door of Amara's temporary office. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Amara, sat down across the desk, and said, "Reginald Carrington has just submitted a request for early retirement effective the end of the month." Amara looked at her for a long moment. Then she took a sip of the coffee. "Decline it," she said. "He does not get to retire out of this. The review will proceed first." Margaret almost smiled. "Almost. Understood, Ms. Whitlock." 3 weeks later, Monday morning, the same day of the week she had first walked through that door, Amara pulled into the executive level of the parking garage at 7:43 a.m. The brass plate beside her space had been updated. It read AWHITLOCK, managing partner. She had not asked for the change. The building had simply made it. She noted the small thing, the real thing, and let it go. She turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet of her car. Not because she was preparing herself. Not because she needed to steady something or talk herself into what came next. Just because it was a Monday morning in late autumn, and the light through the garage entrance was good, and she had learned, over 12 years and especially over the last 3 weeks, to take the quiet moments when they came. She picked up her bag and got out of the car. The lobby of Whitlock, Bryce, and Carrington was the same as it had always been. Same marble floor, same brass nameplate by the front entrance, 3 names still. By the end of the quarter, after the formal partnership vote on the firm's restructured governance charter, it would read Whitlock, Bryce, and Acaffer. Reginald Carrington had not retired. The early retirement request had been declined. The conduct review had been completed. The partnership had voted to remove him for cause on a margin of 9-4, and the firm's bylaws had been amended to require that any partner named on the firm's masthead must meet ongoing standards of conduct independent of tenure. The vote had taken 11 minutes. She walked past the security desk. The guard nodded. "Good morning, Ms. Whitlock." She nodded back and kept moving. The changes were not dramatic. She had not wanted dramatic. Dramatic was loud and performative and faded. She had wanted structural, the kind of change that embedded itself into the daily operations of a firm and stayed there long after the legal press moved on to its next story. New compliance intake process. All formal complaints now logged through Margaret Acaffer's office, with mandatory timestamps and parallel filing to outside counsel of record. No more redacted exit interviews. No more cleanup requests that quietly closed without follow-up. Every document, every date, every signature, permanent and visible. A new firm-wide associate mentorship program, voluntary, confidential, designed and launched in 8 days by a young paralegal named Lydia Ferreira, who had been promoted on Amara's first official Monday, and had been given a small operating budget and full institutional backing to build it. Lydia had presented her draft framework on a Thursday afternoon, and Amara had approved it before close of business. The program had received 47 sign-ups in its first week, a mandatory external review of all closed personnel matters at the firm going back 10 years, being conducted jointly by Margaret's office and an independent labor and employment firm. Slow work, careful work, the kind that did not make the trade press but mattered more than anything that did. Trevor Hinz had been terminated for cause on day 12, following the completion of the external investigation. His state bar license was now under review. The investigation had identified additional victims beyond the 7 Margaret had originally documented, 4 of whom had agreed to participate in the bar disciplinary process now that they were legally protected from retaliation. He would not practice law again, not in this state. These were the things she had built in 3 weeks. There would be more. There would always be more. She stopped at Margaret Ackerfer's office on her way upstairs. The door was open. Margaret was at her desk reading a document. The wall of filing cabinets behind her looked, somehow, slightly less heavy than it had on the morning Amara had first walked in. "Morning, Margaret." "Morning, Ms. Whitlock." Margaret looked up. "You have a call at 9 from outside counsel. And this came for you on Friday afternoon." She produced a small envelope, Amara's name on the front, handwritten. Amara took it. She put it in her jacket pocket and headed upstairs. The managing partner's office was on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows facing east. The morning sun came in at a long, flat angle across the floor. The previous occupant had left behind a leather chair that did not quite suit her, a credenza full of legal trophies, and a small potted orchid on the corner of the desk that had been on its last leaves. She had kept the orchid. She had been watering it for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of consistent care had done something improbable to it. A new bud at the base of the stem, small and pale green and slightly ridiculous against the dark wood of the credenza. She had not replaced it. She had just kept watering it. She sat down at her desk. She opened her jacket pocket and took out the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. She opened it. "Ms. Whitlock, I am writing this from my desk in the contracts division. I just received the formal notice that the mentorship program is being rolled out next month, with my name listed as program director on the firm-wide announcement. I want you to tell you something I have not said to anyone in this firm in 7 years. I was the paralegal in the corner of Trevor's office on Tuesday morning. I have been the paralegal in the corner of his office, in some version, for 2.5 years. I watched him do things to other women that I never reported because I had been told, in language that left no room for confusion, that reporting them would end my career here. I believed it. The building gave me every reason to believe it. I was not the paralegal in the corner any more the day after you walked in. I am writing this on a Friday, 3 weeks after you walked into that office. I have been promoted. I have been given an actual job that has nothing to do with hiding in the corner of a senior man's office. I am building something I am proud of for the first time since I was admitted to this firm. I want you to know that I see what you did, not just for me, for all of us. For the ones who came before me and the ones who would have come after if you had not been the person who got out of the car that morning. Thank you for being the kind of managing partner worth working for." Lydia Amara folded the letter. She held it in both hands for a moment. She looked out the window at the city below, at the morning traffic moving steadily up the avenue, at the small, ordinary motion of a Monday morning that belonged to people who had no idea, and would never need to know, what had happened on the 12th floor of this building on a Tuesday 3 weeks ago. She placed the letter in the top drawer of her desk. She closed the drawer. She opened the first case file of the morning. The morning light moved across her desk in long, even angles. The firm hummed around her. Phones, footsteps, the soft sound of an elevator bell 3 floors down, the sounds of a building at work, her building, her firm. She kept her eyes on the page. She kept her pen moving. She did not look up. She had work to do. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked two special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.